Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hello, it's Sean, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. Most mornings at around 6 a.m., I have a Spanish lesson. At the end of 2023, I decided I wanted to get reasonably proficient in Spanish. So I started listening to a Spanish-based story, and I did this daily. I'd been flirting with the language since my teens, but I couldn't read more than a single paragraph, if that. If you started speaking to me at a reasonable pace, I'd understand bits and pieces, but I'd still miss the context, and most of the time I'd be nodding my head saying see, see, see. However, and surprise, surprise, I had no problems with English or Hindi, Marathi, or any other language that I knew. Not only could I read them at high speed, but if I watched a YouTube video at 2x, it wouldn't faze me at all. It was easy to understand. I'd assimilate all the information without any kind of dropout. The reason for this seemingly magical act is a concept called bandwidth. And this concept, it's illustrated well by the story of the violin teacher and his students. Let's hear the story, shall we? The violin teacher gives his students a new piece to learn. As you'd expect, they start playing the piece, but must stop repeatedly. This is a typical learning sequence. The brain can only parse a fixed amount of information before stopping and having to take a break. The teacher would allow the students to progress in a staged manner and then ask them to play that new piece that he'd given them. In the middle of that recital, as they were playing the violin, he would approach them and ask them a few questions. And if the student put the violin down and started speaking to the teacher knew that they were not ready. However, once the students could do both simultaneously, play the piece and hold the conversation, it demonstrated that they were using very little bandwidth for either of the activities. Bandwidth is within our control. When we talk, we don't say to ourselves, left foot, left foot, balance, balance, balance. We do so without having to think about it. It's the same thing when we converse in a very familiar language. We don't stop at every word to check back at what we're saying. However, the moment we have to do something that is outside of our comfort zone, the struggle becomes very real. And if you're wondering, why are you listening to this? What's the connection? It's because of the relation between bandwidth and chaos. And every one of us, as we go through our day-to-day weeks, months, years, we run into a whole lot of chaos. If you look around you, you'll notice that some people handle the chaos very well. And the rest of us, we use different terms. We use terms like, we have no time, we are stressed out. We say these things, but really what the problem happens to be, and usually is a factor of bandwidth. You don't have the time. I don't have the time because all of that time has been taken up by that activity. This clogging of bandwidth sets us up for a perfect storm, because when chaos appears, as it no doubt will, you've already used up all of your bandwidth. And now chaos demands even more from you. This is where the brain refuses to cooperate. You feel an enormous amount of ongoing stress. And how do we deal with this problem every single day? Yeah, we look at the chaos and we try to subdue it. We try to deal with whatever nuisance has come through the door. But we need to take a few steps back. The reason why that chaos is so huge and so uncontrollable is because we don't already have the bandwidth to cope with it. We're always trying to eliminate the issues that keep popping up. But that's a lopsided strategy because we're constantly stressed. And it's not always because of the chaos. It's because we can't cope with speaking to the violin teacher and playing the music simultaneously. There are exceptions to the chaos rule, however. Sometimes the chaos is at an exceptionally high level. I'll give you a story. In the early stages of our business, which is the membership site at 5000 BC, we had a once-in-a-lifetime problem. The internet was brand new, and Google and Amazon were on the scene, but there was no sign of Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, definitely not TikTok. Blogs were just starting to make their mark. And at this point in time, we decided to start the membership site at 5000 BC. Membership site software was not readily available, and when it was not that customizable. So we hosted 5000 BC on a site called Vision Gate. And one day, while we were on holiday on a glacier, Fox Glacier, or rather in the area, we got an email telling us that the site was down. And this is the reason why you should not check email on holiday, which we learned from that episode. But back then we were checking email. And yes, it was a bit frustrating because, the site is down. But back then, websites went down regularly. Even Amazon.com would occasionally go offline. However, a day passed, then two, and the website was still as dead as a dodo. I've been trying all week to contact the hosting company, and when I finally got through, they said, yes, we have a backup. They said that they would restore it immediately. However, they then replied with a second email saying that someone had deleted the backup. As you can tell, this was a situation that involved extreme chaos. We were fortunate because we had our own patchy backup. Nonetheless, I struggled to sleep for almost a month. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., which is early even for me, and then I'd work on restoring the site. You could say that I was using up all my capacity, all my bandwidth. But in most cases, the chaos is not big enough. It is minor chaos that keeps coming through the door. A phone call, an email, some small little thing. And we don't have the bandwidth to cope with it because it's taking us so much time to do what we already should be doing at a much faster pace. The reality is that we can all become better violin players. And you don't have to change this bandwidth by a lot. Let's say you take 2 hours to write an article. How about you write it in 1 hour and 45 minutes? Let's say you do a podcast and it takes you 6 hours, like it used to, for me at least. And then what if I could do it in 5? Maybe it's something simple like making lunch every day, and it takes you a lot of time. What could you do that would reduce that amount of time? Because this whole factor of time is also a bandwidth issue. The more time you take doing that task, the more energy you're burning up. The more energy you're burning up, the more tired you're getting. And now you're running out of bandwidth, and at the same time, chaos is trying to force itself through the window, through the door, through every outlet possible. And if you're asking yourself, what are you to do with this information? It's 2 parts. Bandwidth is the part that we can control. Chaos is the part that is primarily out of our control. So it makes sense to somehow improve our skills. We need to look at what we're doing on any given day and figure out at least how we can do some of those things faster. And as we go through those set of skills, we learn how to speed up almost everything that we do. This is the part that's in our control, And instead, we keep attacking the part that's out of our control. The chaos we can never manage. It always shows up randomly. So the only part we can control is the stuff that we're doing, and we can do it in small increments. There is no doubt that you will get better at most things. When we first started our business, everything took an enormous amount of time, and we could only do 4 or 5 things. Now we do those 4 or 5 things in probably one morning. And so we also are constantly taking on new challenges because otherwise it will be boring. And as we take on new challenges, our bandwidth gets eaten up, and then chaos is allowed to enter again. To become better at spending time and having lots of time to waste, the only way is to look at the things you're doing and then reduce it by 10% or 15%. And suddenly you have more bandwidth. Suddenly, whatever chaos comes through the door, you're dealing with it. As you go through life, you will take on more challenges. We all do. And of course, the formula repeats itself over and over again. All of us are good violin players. We have to be better. We have to be faster at doing the tasks that we do on a regular basis. All of us can become better, superior violin players. You have to, because chaos is just around the corner today, tomorrow, and next week as well. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. What's the one thing you can do today? Try and lop off just a little bit. It doesn't have to go from 100% to 50% or 100% to 75%. Maybe just a little bit. And that you can do. Look at the tasks that you're doing and just pick one random task. Maybe it's making lunch, or maybe it's writing an email. And how can you reduce that amount of time that you take? Because that reduces the bandwidth, and then you have that extra time. And with that extra time, when chaos comes through the door, you know, yeah, I can deal with this. So just 5% or 15%, if you can just manage that and then systematically go over 2 or 3 things, you will find you have so much more time in the day, less chaos, and therefore you don't have to use phrases like, I'm so stressed all the time. And with that, let's find out what's happening in Psychotactics land. It's April. This is when the storytelling course is about to be launched. And this is a live course. I'm conducting this course, which means that as you make the mistakes, I fix them, and we go through several weeks of just building stories, how to tell a good story, how not to be boring, how not to tell the same story over and over again. Storytelling is crucial, has always been crucial. People will tell you, oh, this is a new phenomenon. Of course, you know better. You know that it's not a new phenomenon at all. But the problem is that storytelling always is this full-length thing, this movie, this script, this something. And most of us, we have to tell the story in a podcast, in a booklet. It's pretty hard to do. Besides, it's not just about telling the story, but then reconnecting it to whatever it is that the article is about. So if the article is about pricing, we go looking for some story or case study about pricing. If the article is about conversion, same thing. And that's called research. That's just another waste of time. That's what takes up a huge amount of bandwidth. And the way around it is to have great stories and then connect them to whatever it is you're doing. So the article could be about bats or microphones or, I don't know, just about anything. You just find an interesting story and then you connect it to pricing or conversion or whatever it is you're writing about. That's a magic trick. That's what you learn on the article writing course. So go to psychotactics.com, look for courses, and on the 13th, you have to be on the wait list to get on the storytelling course. The course will be when we get back from Portugal, which is somewhere later in the year. I don't have the dates just offhand, but it's going to be later in the year. You'll see it all on the page. Go there and have a look. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. I'll say bye for now. Bye-bye. Still listening? What are the ways that I reduce some of the bandwidth? Remember at the start of the podcast, I said that sometimes I'll listen to YouTube at 2x. I don't do that usually unless the speaker is very slow or I have to get to the point. But if you press your finger on the tablet or your phone, YouTube will speed up to 2x. And I took that concept and I started doing my Spanish that way. So what does it sound like? Here's a little sample.
Trabajabas hasta las 4. To answer your question, did you used to work till 4 o'clock? Trabajabas hasta las 4. Trabajabas hasta las 4. So once more, what is I used to work? Trabajaba. Trabajaba. He, she, you formal used to work. Trabajaba. Trabajaba. You informal used to work. Trabajabas. Trabajabas. What is they used to work hard?
Trabajan duro. Now don't work so hard. Reduce the bandwidth. Bye for now.